All right, well, it's time for episode 21. As usual, it's me, Chucky from the forums, and we've also got Jigsaw.
It's your boy Jaggy.
G-Money. Uh, what's on today's menu?
We have a somewhat interesting collection of movies tonight. First one's a somewhat more modern movie, Better Watch Out, from 2016, also known under the name Safe Neighborhood. Then from the late 80s, we have Blood Diner, 1987. Following that, a British movie from 2015 titled Robot. Then we have a somewhat of a classic, Sleepaway Camp from 1983. And we finish off with Hound from 2019.
Okay, well, we'll get things started with Better Watch Out from 2016. So this movie's about this little rich snobby kid who has a crush on his babysitter and fakes a break-in situation at his house, which he was going to foil in an attempt to somehow impress the babysitter. So she finds out it's kind of all bullshit and is going to get him in trouble for doing it. And then he takes her hostage in an even more elaborate type of, I guess, backup situation that he had. So he's kind of planned out every single detail to avoid getting in trouble for any of the shit that he's done on the night. So I remember at the time this movie came out, there was some fairly positive comments and reviews about this one. I guess maybe because it's a little different from just, your standard Christmas horror movie. It's got quite a bit of an elaborate plot there. So I think the story itself is fine. For me personally, this is a movie where you probably really have to enjoy the characters, though, because the characters, especially the boy and the babysitter, they take up a good chunk of the screen time in this movie. And while I wasn't annoyed too much by any of the characters, I didn't necessarily care too much about any of the characters either. So for me, that really, I guess, marred my enjoyment of the movie. Because I think, like I said, the plot is fine. It's decent. I just thought it was okay.
I actually have to admit I was pleasantly surprised by this movie. I didn't really know much about it. In fact, I didn't really know anything about it. I thought it was just like a generic slasher Christmas movie. But then I saw it has the two kids from The Visit from 2015, and then I was like somewhat surprised. So I really enjoyed the story. There's a few plot twists that take you for a ride. And I didn't see either one coming, to be honest. I actually didn't mind the characters. I sort of like the babysitter. I like her resilience through the situation. Some of the final scenes, of course, in the movie are pretty enjoyable. And I get that one of the main kids can be somewhat annoying, in sort of like a pompous way. But he sort of cracked me up with his attitude. Very very iffy attitude. But I thought the characters were okay enough and the story went well enough to make this overall a decently enjoyable movie. And it helps that there was some, not necessarily over the top, but there's some decent gore scenes too.
And that's the review.
Well, I mean, also, this is just a side note, but seeing Patrick Warburton, who played the father, who was there just for a few scenes near the beginning, he's a actor who I know him more for his voice, from Family Guy. It was sort of nice seeing him too. It was kind of a sort of nice surprise.
And I guess, for some people, the wife, played by Virginia Madsen, who people will recognize from Candyman and a few other things.
Yeah, it's funny because I tried to recognize her from Candyman, but I just couldn't do it. Because I really like Candyman, and it took me a while to realize, to think about that name, and it's like, oh hey, that's who it is. But when she appears toward the end of the movie, I'm like, I can't see it, so I feel like I missed out on that, but that's okay. As far as like modern day like home invasion movies go, or what seems to be home invasion, I feel like this one was, the story is written pretty well, and I think, like you said, if you don't like the characters, it might be or if you necessarily don't like them but they don't do anything for you, I can imagine you not necessarily care much for the movie because it's somewhat character driven. But I personally enjoyed the performances enough to it didn't really bother me. So it's your loss.
Yeah. Well, I've tried watching this movie quite a few times, and every single time I watch it, I either like fall asleep during it, or I don't know, for some reason I just struggle to get through this one. Even though I'm not necessarily disliking it, it's always been a tough thing for me to complete in one go.
I mean, as far as like I guess more recent Christmas horror movies, this is probably one of the better ones I've seen. I can't think of anything else off the top of my head that stands out.
Yeah. Well, I certainly I can see why some people would enjoy it because, like I said, it is a little different to your typical Christmas horror movie. But yeah, the characters just didn't do it for me. So.
And the paint can scene, did it like throw it over the top for you?
Well, I mean, it was kind of amusing when he said, "Are you trying to home alone him or something like that? Are you home aloning him?" Yeah. It was kind of amusing just when he said that, but the actual scene, I mean, I would have liked to have seen the actual paint can hit his face rather than off screen and just have paint fly everywhere.
Well, we did see some of the aftermath a bit later on.
Yeah.
You're just a hard guy, you please.
Well, when it comes to this movie, yeah.
I also have to admit I like the sort of comedy relief sidekick kid.
Not that I really enjoyed any of the characters. He was okay, yeah.
He just cracked me. He's like what, a 12, 13-year-old kid who's like smoking weed and stuff. I mean, that's who I wish I could have been back in his time.
You are him in this time.
Oh, if only. But I don't know. I think like those three characters that got along well enough to make the movie somewhat believable. I really think it's and I can't again with pronunciation. Olivia De Jong. I'm not sure if the J is pronounced or not. Who is the same girl from The Visit, like I mentioned before. I think she had a really solid performance here. See, I thought her character was okay. I didn't mind rooting for her character. I don't know. I guess I just had an easier time with this movie, maybe, because personally, I thought the characters were pretty okay. Even though some of them may be like generic psychotic, but even so, I thought it worked out okay.
Maybe if they had like a bigger boobed babysitter, that would have enticed me a little more.
Well, okay. I did like the news scene with the drunken ex-boyfriend. I did think it was like spectacular. And the whole thing where hey, write this note. I thought it was a bit much, but the news, the hanging itself, I thought was pretty okay.
Yeah. Better watch out, hey. It was okay. I didn't dislike the movie, but at the same time, it's been a struggle for me to get through this one on a couple of different occasions, and just because the movie it's going places, but it's not necessarily going places that I want it to go, and like I said, the big thing is probably the characters. The boy, he's kind of a decent actor, but at the same time, he kind of annoyed me, and like I said, babysitter, maybe have, maybe it's just if it was someone else in that role, it might have made all the difference. I'm not sure. Once again, she's a decent actress. It's just, I don't know, the characters just didn't do it for me. I'm going to give it a 6, and I might still watch it again at some point, many years later, and we'll see how things go then.
Out of interest, how many times have you tried to watch this and got sidetracked or fall asleep or whatever?
2 or 3 times.
That is impressive.
Yeah.
Yeah, I enjoyed this movie. I liked the story. I thought, the twists were pretty decent. Maybe some people saw them coming, but they took me by surprise, so that's always nice. I like the characters. When they went that direction, I sort of liked some of the motives they had. And overall, I think it's a pretty enjoyable movie. I don't think it's necessarily amazing, but I could see myself giving this another watch, the next 16, 17 years. So I would probably throw this one an 8 out of 10. But it averages out to a 7, though, between both of our ratings, so that makes it an average movie, so that's okay. And actually, just a quick side note, the director who did this movie, Chris Pagove also directed a found footage horror movie from 2010 titled Undocumented, which, even if you're not a fan of found footage, it's still a movie I would probably say is one of the better found footage movies I've seen. So just, if that sounds like your type of thing, you should check it out. Next up, we have from 1987, Blood Diner, in which two brothers who run sort of like a health food cafe type thing are trying to collect body parts and organs and such to reconstruct this ancient god so she can be resurrected under the direction of the late uncle who they undug, and they took his brain out, and it's like just like a brain in this jar giving them directions. It's fantastic stuff. It has somewhat of a comedic feel. It's a bit over the top at times, and it's certainly interesting. What what do you make of this one, Chucky?
Yeah. So this was actually a first time watch for me. Obviously, it's a movie I've heard of many times, and it got released on Blu-ray along with...
It's amazing.
Like, many years ago, it got released on Blu-ray along with, I think, Chopping Mall, and yeah. So I was thinking something along the lines of, just a cheesy 80s horror movie. You probably get something out of it just because of the time period and all, but yeah, I had a thoroughly unenjoyable time with very few entertaining sequences in this movie. I had very little interest in the story or its characters. A lot of them had stupid voices, and it just seems like such a messy movie. It's just all over the place, and I was very surprised at how bad it was, because I was expecting at least some cheesy 80s goodness, and I guess on one hand you could say it does have that, but it's just all the wrong kinds.
Yeah, I probably don't disagree at all with what you just said. This movie is somewhat terrible. I've seen it once before, and I actually, on IMDb, I gave it, I think, a 6 out of 10 initially, but when I just watched it, I finished it about an hour ago. It's like such a worse movie than that. It's just awful stuff.
I mean, the occasional comment by the brain was kind of amusing.
Yeah, I don't know how much we need to hear about his slang and stuff. It wasn't my type of thing.
Yeah, pretty much outside of just one or two humorous comments there, everything else was, pretty terrible or unenjoyable.
Do you not like the exciting finale with the horrible music and the fantastic special effects and the like?
Yeah, it was a sight to behold.
That it was.
Yeah, before I watched this movie, I actually watched the trailer, and it's one of those trailers where it actually shows, or they've filmed a lot of stuff just for the trailer itself. So, as I was watching the trailer, which I still didn't think the trailer was anything special, but when you watch a movie, it just feels like you're watching something almost completely different. And I don't know, that just threw me off, and maybe that also put me on the wrong track as well.
Yeah, this movie, I'm somewhat surprised because it doesn't have great reviews, at least not what I've seen, but it still has like an okay, perception. Whenever the few people I know who know about the movie mention it, they seem to have an okay time with it. And I suspect that maybe for the right type of people, they probably do have an okay time with it. But it's just the comedy aspect and the story aspect were just, in my view, it's just pretty terrible stuff.
I don't know how the fuck this has a 5.3 on IMDb. That's way too high.
I know, it surprised me too. I will say the one thing I do like about it, and I'm using like as a somewhat of a strong word here, but even though it was, over the top, I did like, seeing people's arms and body parts get cut off, and the random like nude aerobics thing, that scene, like when they just come and shoot in one of them wearing, I think, a Nixon mask. So that was random enough to be somewhat interesting. It didn't make the movie gold by any means, but I was okay with it.
Well, I watched just a standard quality version of this. I didn't watch a really good HD version, but maybe I should have. But still, I don't think it would have changed my rating much at all. But that nude aerobic scene I couldn't see all that great, but it looked like there was some flapjack titties in there, and that didn't really impress me too much.
I do enjoy how you judge a movie based on the quality of a woman's breasts. That's some good stuff.
Hey, don't give me shit on how I rate movies.
By all means, I think it's a very valid way of seeing things. To be honest, I didn't care as much for those women, but the woman in the cave, she was okay, I think.
It kind of surprised me when she started kicking that dude's ass.
Yeah, that was one of those goofy 80s things, like, oh hey, she knows kung fu and she's just fighting him naked, and then she randomly dies because of stalagmite or stalactite, whichever one it is. Some good stuff. My enthusiasm is very high right now. But I had a difficult time with that movie. And one thing that sort of bothered me, and you may have noticed this, but like, why were there so many like 50s based songs in that movie? Like, was it going for like a 50s type vibe, or was that just me?
I didn't really take too much notice of the music.
Well, you weren't missing much. It was also somewhat terrible. So I've had the displeasure of seeing this one twice now, and I do know that some people call it somewhat like a spiritual successor to Blood Feast, the 1963 H.G. Lewis movie. And it has a somewhat similar plot, but I mean, Blood Feast is in its own way, it's very much a classic of the splatter genre. And this movie is just a must, like Chucky said. It's potentially enjoyable enough for a single watch. Like if you like seeing this guy wrestle a Hitler Nazi type guy for some reason, by all means, give this one a watch. But the comedy didn't really do it for me, and while I did like some of the gore effects, there wasn't enough in this movie to really keep me going. So I'm giving this one something like, I don't know, let's just say a 4 out of 10. That seems fair.
Yeah, I'm going with a 3 out of 10. Yeah, like we've already covered, it was thoroughly unenjoyable. It's messy. It's all over the place. Didn't care for the characters. It was pretty stupid.
Yeah, I think that's what it comes down to. The movie is just it's probably one of the worst movies I've seen from the late 80s. Like, it's just not a good thing.
Anyways, let's move on to something that, well, it's not that much better, but
it's a remake of Child's Play.
It wishes it was anything like Child's Play. So we've got Robert from 2015. It's got this nanny who's fired from her job for essentially being a senile old bat. She forgets where all her cleaning stuff is, and she gets fired. But before she leaves, she gives a doll named Robert to the young boy of the family. And of course there's something quite sinister about the doll. It starts hurting people and yada yada yada, whatever bullshit. Now, I mean, the cover art for this one, the tagline on it, at least the one that I've got on our website, says, "This isn't Child's Play." I damn well got that right. It is nowhere near as good as Child's Play. It's not even in the same stratosphere. It's just... it's not good. I mean, it's not anywhere near the worst movie I've ever seen, by any means, but still, it's a bad movie. I believe it's based on a true story. There is, like, this real-life Robert doll. Doesn't really look anything like this doll, but...
It doesn't look anything like this doll.
Yeah, it's not good.
So, yeah, I think for most of the time I was somewhat bored with this one. It just kept going, and so some of the way they shot the scenes, there's some like really strange cuts in this movie. There's like this one, hey, I wonder what happened to the babysitter, and then there's like a flashback just to show the audience what happened, and it just, I didn't care for it. The whole style of the movie just seems sort of dry and generally pretty boring. The husband was a dick, but the wife was like insane, and the kid was annoying. There's not much good stuff in this movie. The design of the robot, though, is just, in my opinion, somewhat hideous. And even toward the end of this movie, when things start picking up a bit more, and there's even a slight twist at the end of the movie, which they stole from Halloween 4. So, yeah, it's not a movie I found much pleasure in. And I guess I was okay with watching it once, but this is one I can't imagine seeing again. nor can I imagine watching the sequels, of which there are 3.
Yeah. And, I mean, this is a pretty... obviously, a lot of horror movies are low budget. This one has a pretty low budget, from what you can see, based on the level of acting and the type of effects in the movie. I mean, every time you see the doll, if it's moving, it's moving because someone's kind of holding the doll with their hands strategically placed outside of view of the camera, but, you know, it's just kind of like someone's holding the doll and moving it around with their hand. It's when you compare that to something like you see in a Chucky movie where it's so much more intricate. They've got, you know, more than 10 people trying to operate the Chucky doll. In this movie, it's someone just holding the doll by its legs, propping it around on the screen type of thing. Which, I mean, it works okay enough, but it's, like I said, it just... The effects and attention to detail with this doll is so much lacking compared to something like you'd get out of a Chucky movie.
Although I will say this is about the movie than Seed of Chucky.
No.
Yeah.
Your hatred for that movie is overshadowing a lot of things, and even Chucky just being in a movie is more entertaining than this piece of shit.
At least you got to see some nice family drama, though. The father won about whether his son was gay or not, and some good stuff.
The wife actor, she's just it was just kind of frustrating for her because she's always. I mean, I watched this movie weeks ago, so maybe I've forgotten some of the finer details, but she always seems to. I mean, obviously she's got problems. She's depressed, and so that's a part of it. But it's just really annoying to see her on screen constantly having those breakdowns, and yeah.
I will say the whole lipstick scene just bothered me. In which the robot doll, I think writes "die" on her mirror, and she's like rushing to get her husband to show him, and of course by the time they get back upstairs, it's gone, and just that type of cliches. Just I just get tired of that type of thing, and a lot of movies do it. The idea of, oh hey, since it's not there now, it must never have been there. You must be delusional. It just, oh god, I'm so over that.
Yeah, it's got a bit of a kind of twist cliffhanger type ending that we've seen that type of thing before. Like I said, that was kind of the mention that you had for Halloween 4, wasn't it?
Indeed.
It probably couldn't have ended any worse, but sorry, I mean, well, it could have and it couldn't have. By the time you got to the ending, you didn't really care how it ended, so.
Yeah, you just wanted it to be over.
Yeah, you just want it to be over.
As long as it ends, that's all that matters. And it looks like I was slightly mistaken. The movie actually has 4 sequels, because it looks like one came out earlier this year.
5 movies in this series, and the first movie's pretty bad itself.
Maybe the other 4 movies up it up a bit.
Yeah, I don't see that happening, but...
I'm reading about the new one, named Robot Reborn. This is just quick plot on IMDb. In 1951 USSR, infamous killer doll Robot battles Stalin's henchmen on board a plane.
That just sounds like... I mean, we've got the Puppet Master movies where they're like fighting like Nazis and shit.
I will say that I think some of those Puppet Master movies are actually pretty okay, though.
Yeah, but it just feels like a cheap clone or trying to copy what those other movies have done. And
yeah, and I'd say even the bad Puppet Master movies still were a bit fun. They still had a bit of charm to them, and maybe this series adds more charm. But in the first movie, it just seemed more dry than anything. Would you like a robot doll yourself?
Nah, I'm good.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a pretty bad movie. The acting's quite mediocre. The effects are not all that impressive. The doll's not impressive. It's a very unimpressive movie. I'm going to give it a 4 out of 10. By no means the worst movie I've ever seen, but it's not something that I care to watch again.
Yeah, I think the most interesting thing about this movie is the fact that it's British, which didn't really help much because the movie itself was pretty horrible. It's something to watch in foreign movies. Adds a little bit extra, a little more spice. But this one is just more than anything. It's just dry, it's boring, uninspired, and pretty much a piece of trash. So I'm going to throw this one maybe probably a 4 out of 10, if only because it was almost okay for a little bit. The first 10 minutes I thought was somewhat interesting, and I thought that old woman was such a a dick for hey, you fired me for this logical reason. Let me give your kid $100. That's some quality cleaning lady stuff. So yeah, it's not a movie I would recommend. But if you do watch it, make sure you catch the 4 sequels.
I probably will watch the sequels, just...
Unfortunately, I would too, probably.
Yeah, but I certainly don't envision them being good. Maybe slightly better, but certainly not good.
Yeah, it looks like all of them are directed by the same guy too, so that's good stuff.
Well, hopefully he learns from his mistakes in this one and makes a less shittier movie.
Yeah, based on the IMDb ratings, I don't suspect that, but we can indeed be hopeful. Next up, we have in many words, probably the most classic movie we're talking about tonight, Sleepaway Camp from 1983, in which a shy girl whose father was murdered sort of in front of her during some boating accident, and her cousins go to a summer camp. Shortly thereafter, murders begin happening of these, either the campus or the staff, and who is doing these murders, and will Angela ever open up about her feelings? Find out tonight. It's a decent movie. It's not my favorite of the whole camp slasher type stuff. I think Friday the 13th and The Burning are probably, even to some degree, Madman from 82. I think those movies are probably a bit better. This one feels really strange at times. I forget what her name is, but the aunt in the movie, Aunt Martha, it looks like. She's such a strange character.
She keeps fondling her chin as she talks to herself.
Yeah, and the way she talks, it's just so awkward. I'm sure it was intentionally over the top. And the whole kook, the child molesting kook guy, that guy was also just a bit much.
You gotta love how once the kids are running out, he comes out and he's still doing up his belt in front of all these other dudes, and he's like, oh, I don't know what's up their ass. Yeah.
Yeah, he was just trying to find him something that she would like to eat. Wink, wink. So it's interesting. I mean, the slasher aspects themselves are okay. I actually think a lot of the kills in this movie are decent. The whole thing with the wasp hive, I thought was pretty solid.
Yeah, I don't mind this movie. I think it's pretty decent. It's got some interesting kills in the movie. Even though I would call it a slasher movie, it still doesn't feel as much like a slasher movie. Mainly, I guess, because most of the kills aren't... I mean, they aren't your traditional slasher type attacks. They're being killed in all these, I guess, just unconventional ways that you normally wouldn't see with someone, just chasing you with a knife or an axe or whatever. And obviously, the ending to the movie is the biggest draw for the movie, because it does have one of the best horror movie endings, in my opinion. I mean, if you don't know anything about the ending to this movie, don't look up what the ending is. Just watch the movie and then experience that ending. Because I'm pretty sure, even though I'm trying to think back when I first watched this movie, I can't remember if I actually had read what the ending was, or had heard from other people what it was, but I remember the first time I watched the movie, being kind of somewhat surprised at it. So
somewhat surprised.
Well, I'm just saying, I don't think I was aware fully of what the ending was. So obviously, if you hear it from other people, you're not going to be surprised when you see it. And I think that's a part of the fun when you watch this movie and you get to the end and you get hit with that ending. It does a little something.
I have to admit, the inhuman shriek growl type thing is a bit much, but
I like it.
I'm sure you do. But Yeah, but the ending itself, yeah, it's pretty sad and it's very memorable for pretty obvious reasons. And I think it's sort of hidden pretty well throughout the movie. One of the flashbacks toward the end that sort of gets more into it. I sort of liked how they went with the whole idea. I thought it worked out pretty well.
You seem to me like someone who would fall for that mind over matter trick.
I'm going to say I probably wouldn't, if only because I would never be in a camp.
So you've never been to a camp before? I guess these type of camps aren't as popular now as they were back, 70s, 80s.
Yeah, they're mostly for middle class and rich kids, so.
Yeah.
It would not be my idea of a fun time. I'd probably be more like Angela than anything, and just not do anything. Of course, I would not be okay watching. I just want to be back in my cabin, reading or something.
I remember being on a few camps, sort of similar to this. More in the 90s and 70s and 80s, but yeah, fun times, I guess.
Did you have any bitchy girls that you were attracted to?
No. I remember, there was definitely where people kind of fall into certain groups of different guys that they hang out with, even if you've never met them before. You just kind of fall into the certain group. And so I remember, much like in this movie, there's some of the younger kids who are kind of fighting with the older kids here at the camp, and that type of thing sort of happened at the ones that I went to.
Yeah, speaking of which, the guy who runs the camp, when he saw them throwing balloons at, Angela, and then the casting, starts defending her and starts shouting at the guys, and, from that, the guy gets at the little kid is, oh, hey, this guy's mentally unhinged because he's shouting at these guys. Like, that guy was, something else.
Ricky is so intense in this movie. He's motherfucking cocksuckers! Yeah. I appreciated some of his outbursts.
Yeah, I mean, he had probably okay reason too. I mean, especially by the end of the movie, think about how he would have fought.
Yeah. I guess another thing is, this, camp counselor guy, he's got, some epic pectoral muscles. I mean, what? Any bigger and he'd need a bra.
Yeah, on the upside, the guy himself was actually a decent character, so I guess kudos.
Yeah, I mean, he plays the nice guy, so he's kind of enjoyable, I guess, in a way. But yeah, I mean, he's juicing or something.
And another quick thing I wanted to mention. One of my favorite kills in the movie is actually probably one somewhat close to the beginning, where this guy gets his face shoved into some boiling water. Which isn't too different from a scene in actually My Bloody Valentine, from a few years earlier. But this scene too was pretty okay, so you should always watch out for that, especially since the character it happens to is probably a character who very much deserves it.
Yeah, probably the most enjoyable part of the movie for me was just when that one, the Judy character, the bitchy girl in the movie. Just out of nowhere, she gets slapped in the face. That was so enjoyable.
Yeah, they're just some characters who it's completely okay to see violence against, and she was definitely one of them.
Yeah. As Sean Connery would say, there's nothing wrong with a little slap here and a slap there.
I like the Sean Connery impersonation. That's good stuff.
I wasn't trying too hard, actually, but I'm glad you enjoyed that.
Yeah, if you can do a whole show like that, we should be golden. I'll give this a 7.5 out of 10. I'm going to round that down to a 7. So I do think it's a bit above average. This has never been one that blew me away. I mean, I think the ending is pretty fantastic. It's a bit much, but it's pretty decent. And if you go into this not knowing anything about it, somehow, I think you'll have a somewhat enjoyable time. This is another one of those movies that takes you for a bit of a ride toward the end, so hang on tight.
Yeah, I'd give it a 7. I think it's pretty enjoyable. It's got its flaws, but like I said, you gotta love that ending, and there's things throughout the movie. There's some decent kills and some satisfying moments, like I said, when certain people get slapped, and And if you like Jigsaw, you might enjoy the skinny dipping scene too.
Yes, if you're like, yes. They did have some quality bodies.
We'll move on to the final movie for today's show, Haunt from 2019. So on Halloween, a group of friends encounter this extreme haunted house that promises to feed on their darkest fears. And of course, once people are inside, bad things start happening, and their night of fun becomes a night of survival, as they're being hunted and attacked by a number of different psychopaths. Now, this movie's been getting quite a lot of good reviews, and maybe even to the point, I think, where it's getting a little overrated. I don't think it's a bad movie. It's there's moments to the movie that feel a bit cliched or maybe a bit generic at times. There is an interesting subplot that happens kind of before the halfway point or somewhere around there, which really helps to pick things up. But unfortunately, that subplot doesn't really go much further, or doesn't really get explained much more in detail. You know, it's a bit of a roller coaster for me. It starts out kind of okay, then it picks up, then it kind of goes back down again. And because so many people hyped it up, I think that hurt it a little bit when I watched it, because I wasn't expecting anything great, but I was expecting something good, and I think I just got a very okay to decent movie out of this one.
I thought the movie was certainly pretty intense. You know, there were some scenes in the haunted house that, you know, like I was not, you know, cringing and stuff. You know, I don't like spiders, for instance. So the whole thing with spiders in the spider webs, that just bothered me. I would be out of there before I even got in there. I would not go through that at all. So I mean, there were a few scenes, and like the, you know, scene where one of the characters is putting your hand through to feel for, like, you know, hey, got this body part. You know, that had sort of a, you know, predictable conclusion, but even so, it's still a bit tense. My biggest issue with this one is I wanted more backstory on the guys running this haunted house. There were some, like, unanswered questions here. Yeah, it just sort of bugged me. And it doesn't help that the ending I thought was exceptionally weak.
Yeah, that's pretty much how I feel as well. I mean, the killers in the movie, there's some cool masks to check out, but for me, the cast was quite average. None of the characters outside of some of these killers really stood out to me. I didn't really care too much whether they lived or died. There's this boyfriend coming to save the day, and
an abusive boyfriend coming.
Yeah, an abusive boyfriend coming to save the day, and as soon as he gets there, it's well, you know, not to spoil anything, but it almost seemed like pretty much a waste.
Although it is worth mentioning that the main character, who is played by Katie Stevens, she did finish 8th place on the 9th season of American Idol, so well done.
Well, it's good to see things panned out and her singing career has taken off.
Yeah, 8th place on American Idol, some quality. I did have a big issue with their cast. I didn't think they were spectacular by any means, but, you know, they were sort of like the generic haunted house cast type thing. Actually, when I was watching this, I couldn't help but be reminded of a movie that you've seen recently, House of Purgatory, which has a, not necessarily, you know, it's not like it's the exact same, but it's still like a Halloween haunted house type thing. And I was just thinking back to, you know, I know that you did have a great time with that movie, but I was thinking back to, you know, what I enjoyed about that one, and, you know, what this one might have been able to do a bit better. And I don't know, it's unfortunate that it's not really, at least in my experience, it's not really a great like, you know, Halloween haunted house type thing.
Yeah.
Aside from Hall House LLC.
I also had the same thoughts, because, like you said, I saw House of Purgatory, and I was thinking or comparing that with this as I was watching it. Even though they're both kind of different movies in a way, they both focus on, you know, having this extreme type of haunted house situation.
Yeah, and actually, on a related note, so there actually are, like, extreme haunted house type things. And I was actually reading about one after I saw this movie. It just blew my mind because I didn't know anything like this existed. But there's one type of haunted house type thing where you have to sign like a 40-page waiver before you can go through. And, like what they can do to the guests once they sign the waiver, what they can legally do, because it's consensual, it's just like blows my mind. Like pulling out teeth, getting some fingernails pulled out. That just blows my mind that somebody would willingly, I mean, by all means, if that's your type of thing, I guess, but I don't know who would go through that.
Yeah, I think there was like some news articles, whether it was on Facebook or something, that I came across where they talked about. I'm guessing it's this specific one that you're talking about, and they're saying no one's ever gotten through it, and that's because people are just being tortured. They're not. It's not necessarily a haunted house. They're just literally being tortured.
Yeah, like what I'm saying, they can physically assault patrons, hit them with things, waterboard them, force them to eat and drink unknown substances. It's just, I mean, talk about, I mean, I don't get why somebody would sign a 40-page waiver just to go through that. That just blows my mind. But
it's like, hey, let's treat them like they're one of these people in like a Hostel movie or something where they're just tied to a chair and getting fucking chainsawed and everything.
And actually, I think the most surprising thing about all of this is, at least, I read a few articles about this because I was just sort of amazed because, like I said, I'd never heard of this before. Like, there's like one of these with a waiting list of over 20,000 people to go through this, and that just, I mean, like I said, if it's your type of thing, by all means, but I just, after you read through that torture that you could theoretically go through, I would just, even you do get a safe word, but even so, I would not feel safe in that condition whatsoever.
It's really how much torture can you handle before you tap out, and they're probably going to go to the lengths where you're pretty much almost going to die.
Yeah, which leads me back actually to Hound, because at the beginning of this movie, they signed a waiver too. Now it looked to me like a pretty short waiver. I don't know if it's like multiple pages, but it looked pretty short. But as we find out, they give like the address and stuff on it, which of course comes into play toward the in my opinion, somewhat ridiculous conclusion. But I just want to say that the way that they took this movie past the finale, just I was hoping for something I don't know what I was hoping for. Aside from I was hoping for something a bit better than what they gave us. And in many ways, like you said, I feel like this movie is getting quite a bit more positive attention than I would have thought this movie would have gotten.
Mm. And maybe if it didn't get all this attention and I'd watched it, that may have actually helped a little in giving a slightly higher rating than what I'm going to give it. But
yeah, it might have helped a little, but without giving, like I said, any background on some of these people. And to be honest, I'm still not entirely sure if these people were supposed to be. I mean, spoilers. If you have not seen this movie, just wait like 15 seconds. I have no idea if these people are supposed to be like mutated humans or demons or what. And like I said, it never really got into it, but it just sort of bothered me.
I mean, it was interesting when you kind of saw beyond the mask what they kind of look like, but then you want to know, okay, why? And it never gets explained, and yeah, so the main interesting part about the movie, and I mean, sometimes in a movie it's fine if you don't explain that thing and you leave it to the imagination, but in this instance, it's just one of those movies where it just leaves you scratching your head thinking, I really would have liked to know what the hell was going on.
Yeah, there's some movies that you watch that you wish you could like more, and I wish I could like this more than I did. I still had an okay time with it. Like you said, it's still an okay movie, but it's certainly not amazing in my opinion, and it's probably not really. It's not a movie I can imagine myself wanting to see that many more times, and I don't know, it's just a movie that doesn't strike me as something that is really going to stand out. Let's say in 5 years, are people going to be talking about Hound? I just don't see it. I've heard you think about this one for a bit. I'm probably going to give it a 6.5, and I'll probably round that. Let's say, let's go with round it down to a 6, because this movie had the potential to be a pretty decent movie. I mean, Eli Roth of Hostel was one of the producers of this, so I mean, it's not like they didn't have the possibility of making a pretty okay movie, but there's just some unexplained things. The ending falls flat in my opinion. And even though there was some pretty intense scenes, throughout the movie, and some of the gore was pretty solid. It just, the movie overall, it just wasn't nearly as good as I was hoping it could be. And so yeah, I think a 6.5, 6 out of 10 is probably an okay rating.
Yeah, I'm going to go with a 6. It was okay, but yeah, it just felt like before that whole subplot of seeing what's behind their mask, it felt a little cliche and generic at times, and because we didn't get much explanation on the most interesting parts of the movie, it just left a bit of a sour taste in my mouth. And like you said, the ending could have been a lot better, and there's some good things here, but I don't think it was executed all that well. Who knows? Maybe I'll enjoy it a little bit more on next time I choose to give it a watch. But yeah, it just didn't seem all that special to me. I don't know why people are raving so much about it. It's okay. It's nothing special. I don't know if there's anyone out there who actually listens to these full episodes in full. So if there is anyone still listening right now, maybe say something, comment, and
tell me what a bad boy I am.